What is up, everybody? Welcome to an extra special episode of the Eddie Liger Power Hour. I'm joined by Carlos, my co-host, and Eli, our producer and intern. Already got a super chat. Happy birthday, Eddie. Thank you very much. Zero cult leader. Appreciate you. 28 years old. I'm at the point in life where you start not liking your birthdays because you're getting old and there's nothing good that comes from turning 28. I guess at 35 I can run for president, so that's the next big birthday I got. But just some guy, congratulations on being another year closer to being an old shitbag. Yes, exactly. But thank you. One of my favorite wrestling coaches used to say that birthdays are just another day to get better. So I agree with that sentiment. Just another day to advance the class struggle. Well, what's up, Carlos?
Amen, man. First of all, happy birthday. I posted an old school picture of the two of us back when, I think a few days after we first met and we're organizing for the Bernie Sanders primary, Democratic primary in I want to say late 2019. So it's been a beautiful journey of a little bit over 5 years. And, from there to here, and it's been a lot. I've seen all the birthdays that have been in between, and the Eddie from the year previously is always someone who significantly grows because of that great work ethic that your father instilled in you. So I know that the 29-year-old Eddie coming up next year is going to be even better than the one that we have currently in front of us today.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, we got quite a show for you guys. I got a bunch of videos queued up that should be good to react to, and feel free to shoot us your questions or comments in the chat so we can answer any questions that you have or interact with you guys, the audience. But we'll get right into that after the intro.
High Sheriff Hazard is a hard man to be. High Sheriff is his only plan. He digs through pockets, takes what he can, for he's High Sheriff Hazard. He caught me one evening, and here's what he said: "You look like a Russian, you look like a red. And if you're fond of your skin and your head, beware the High Sheriff of Hazard."
Whoops. All right. Look at this. Got a few more super chats rolling in. Well, first, thank you, Michelle Vincent Corbeau, Midwestern Marx member as well. Really appreciate you, comrade. Thank you for always being a supporter.
What's a consistent student of the Marxism school.
Yes.
I've had him, I think, in all of my last 3-4 classes. So shout out to you, Corbus.
Who's worse, Foucault or Nietzsche or Frankfurt School? I guess that's hard to rank. I got to go with Foucault just based on his actions in Tunisia. What do you think, Carlos?
Yeah, my ranking from worst to least worst would be the order that he provides. Actually, Foucault, Nietzsche, and the Frankfurt School. Foucault represents almost like the the turning point of bourgeois ideology towards postmodernism, which is the culmination point of the tradition of philosophical irrationalism, of which Nietzsche was a central figure in that transition, along with Schopenhauer and Edward von Hartmann, but more so Nietzsche. And it gets intensified a little bit in Foucault. And the Frankfurt School, for all their flaws, they have some postmodernized components, but they do at least have to sustain the veneer of Marxism in their analysis, which I think is far superior to both Nietzsche and Foucault. So the order for me would be Foucault, Nietzsche, and then Frankfurt School.
Nam de Guerra. Thank you, David. Appreciate you, brother. Have a drink on me. I will for sure. Thank you, man. That's very nice of you. You guys rock. Hope you're doing well at the CWS. Terry with the 10 Canadian dollars. Happy birthday. Thank you so much, Terry. Thank you for taking a cut out of your blue collar working class paycheck to fund the Institute. We appreciate you. And we'll never take any money from corporate sources. Always straight from the proletariat. But thank you so much, Terry. Feliz cumpleaños. Or Feliz cumple. Maybe it's different in Portuguese.
No. That's just a short.
Short. Okay. How do you debunk the whole cultural Marxism stuff? It mostly stems from the Frankfurt School, like we were saying, or the CIA-backed Congress for Cultural Freedom-backed leftists who tried to replace class struggle with identity politics, and then the right wing points at that and says that is Marxism now. Marxism is just this hyper obsession with identity politics and all this stuff that working class people tend to hate about liberalism. They point at that and call it Marxism. All you have to say is that as soon as you remove the class struggle, it ceases to be Marxism. It's a well-constructed trap in order to turn people against the philosophy by associating it with liberalism.
Absolutely. The main thing to point at is to understand that these people were literally they were built up and promoted for the sake of attacking actual communists and actual Marxists. So their fundamental purpose was anti-communist and anti-Marxist. But they called themselves Marxists. So in a society where what you call yourself determines what you are, perhaps you can call them cultural Marxism. But I don't think there's much Marxism there, given that it's cultural. And the essence of Marxism is analyzing society on the basis of how real, material, objective forces in the economic base and political economy determine other facets of human society. And if you focus on culture in a way that's disconnected and reified from that objective material basis, your analysis is not Marxist. That doesn't mean you can't have a cultural analysis from a Marxist position. We have people like Christopher Caldwell who have done that in the past, and Luke Koch and others. But the Frankfurt School often steered towards, a cultural focus, and that's much more intensified in other people that are considered left in the academy, like Foucault, the postmodernists, the postcolonialists, etc.
For sure. Carlos, have you studied any gender ideology? Yeah, Carlos actually wrote his undergraduate thesis on Judith Butler. He's now writing his doctoral dissertation on expanding Judith Butler's analysis to say, not only is gender fluid, but everything's fluid. So, not only can you be any gender, but you can be a tree.
Except for fluids. Fluids are solid.
Fluids are solid.
Solids are fluids.
That's not on a spectrum. That's hard and fast. So.
Something's on the spectrum. We can say that. But no. Of course, I wrote my undergraduate thesis on Slavoj Žižek and on the sublime object of ideology, if anyone's interested. It's also the paper I used to apply to grad school and the one that got me accepted. But I have studied gender ideology. I had to teach it when I was a TA in one of my ethics classes. And I had interesting predicaments that already happened at that time, which was maybe 5 years ago now, where I had in two of my classes that I had to TA, I had in one, and in the other, two students that had detransitioned. So as I was going through what I was forced to cover and to say, I had these students that were just constantly countering it, which was interesting because a countering perspective of those ideas are not usually allowed to enter into the academy. So I didn't have to do anything. It was a student who could somewhat challenge some of these assumptions for me.
You bet. Upper Decker, you bet QWERTY. QWERTY just caught me throwing the Zin in. You know, Eli, our producer, is one of the people who got me into Zin. So, like, it helps you focus. It gives you energy. There's no research yet that nicotine itself is real bad for you, and it reduces your appetite. It's like a win-win-win. Not promoting nicotine to anyone, but the ACP at this point is like halfway fueled by nicotine. Thoughts on Foster denouncing Stalin? I didn't know that happened. Did he do that?
Which Foster? That's the question.
Yeah,
There's John Bellamy Foster that's alive, and there's the William Z. Foster. William Z. Foster, I don't think he ever denounced Stalin. At least, I mean, there was disagreements, but there wasn't any denunciation of that sort that I know of.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking. I thought, I mean, the secret speech made things crazy, but let me ask ChatGPT.
I don't remember when Foster died either.
Yeah.
56.
No, he never did. He was one of his most committed defenders. That's what I thought. Yeah, Foster is pretty based. People should read Foster. He was, you know, the CPUSA at the time. They weren't ever able to seize power, but they, you know, he was able to keep the party together during the time of Earl Browder. And we side with Foster in the split that happened with the party at that time, 100%. Browder was basically, you know, trying to liquefy the party and turn it into an appendage of the Democrats like it is today. And Foster reconstituted the party similar to what we did with the ACP. So it was a historical lesson we learned a lot from it. It's so ironic that so many of our haters call us Browderites because, you know, the historical precedents for what we did with forming the ACP and taking over CPUSA chapters, you know, lays in the split between Foster and Browder, and we side with Foster in that. Battle Cossack, 500 Argentinian dollars. That's got to be at least 20 American cents. Just kidding, brother. Appreciate you. I hate the leftoids who hate America, calling it America. Literally the cringiest thing ever, even for a non-U.S. citizen like me, and they think AES countries support them. I uploaded a video on Discord to showcase one of these leftoids. Yeah, they're quite ridiculous. And, you know, it's hilarious that they think they're going to be able to get American workers on board with that. Like, if people in your neck of the woods, Battle Cossack, like if people in Argentina want to burn American flags, like knock yourself out. You know, I still don't think it's going to accomplish anything, but like do what you want to do. Our country's, you know, an imperialist power trying to hold your country in poverty. But here in America, if you're burning the American flag, you're like already making yourself repulsive to 99.9% of blue collar working class people. And it's just counterproductive. And Michael Parenti has a whole chapter on that in super patriotism. Apparently it was a thing even back then for people to spell America with a K and, you know, have flag burning ceremonies. Like that'll bring the revolution.
It comes from the protests against the war in Vietnam. I had a professor that made a very interesting statement. He wasn't a Marxist, but he was like a pro-socialism pragmatist scholar. One of the leading scholars of Shaler and William James and John Dewey. And he said that the left in the U.S. lost when during the Vietnam War, instead of picking up the flag, it burned it. It allowed the ruling class to, it's basically a Fidelista sentiment. It's the same thing Fidel told a committee of young students from the U.S. that went to Cuba that were communists and showing solidarity with the Cuban Revolution. He said, that's your flag. Own it. Don't let the ruling class take it. And if after the revolution you want to fuck around with it, do it. But for now, it's your flag. It's a flag of your people, and you have to be the ones that appear to the masses of the American people as the ones that actually represent what is the most holy and worthy represented in that flag.
Yeah, we should look back at Vietnam and our past. I mean, the Vietnam War protests and like past anti-imperialist pro-worker uprisings in America and learn from them. There's a tendency I noticed to like lionize these like historical events and figures and, you know, view them as like perfect rather than looking at them critically to learn from them. You know, whether it's like the Black Panthers or the Vietnam War protests, like, yes, these were amazing things, especially the Panthers. Like, you know, obviously we should uphold Fred Hampton as a hero. But we should also, you know, learn from their mistakes. I'm sure that's what they would want us to do today, not just say, you know, act like they were deities or have this dogmatic view, which, you know, especially with the Vietnam War protests, because they ended up being so heavily MK Ultra. Like, there's a lot to learn there. Happy birthday, Eddie. Grateful for Midwestern Marx's work upholding Marxism, Leninism, ACP Rising. Thank you so much, P Money. We appreciate you, and we will never stop unless all of our core supporters like you guys go away. But I don't see that happening. I think we're just going to keep building until we have a real movement that can change something in this country. But appreciate you very much. Feliz cumpleaños, camarada Eddie. David, one of the OGs, the OG patron. Thank you so much, David. Appreciate you, brother. Thank you for being with us from the beginning. There's not many people who have been around as long as you and stuck with us and stuff, so we appreciate you a ton for that. Foster proof in chat. Oh, where? Thank you, Ty. William Z. Foster, after Khrushchev's secret speech in his selected works on MIA. Do you have like a quote or something more specific, or do you just have a book?
I know from the old heads of the old party that the party just completely accepted the Khrushchev speech line. Of course, there was a ton of people within the party that were dissatisfied. It created a great split in the party, which was intensified by the experience of Hungary. Many people in the party drank the Kool-Aid as far as the Hungarian uprising. But the reasons for why the party took the position that it took on Stalin was because who was materially backing the CPUSA? It was Moscow. It was Papa Khrushchev at that time. And if Papa Khrushchev says, now we got to condemn Papa Stalin, and Papa Khrushchev is the one that's allowing you to put food on the table, to have libraries and all these different projects around the country, giving you the ability to have the real estate and all this other stuff that the CPUSA had in terms of resources, why are you going to go against Papa Khrushchev, right? So it was a situation where, you know, for material incentive reasons, they were beholden to what Khrushchev said. And, you know, in a certain perspective, that's understandable. In another perspective, that's no different than when a politician turns around and does what the people that funded his campaign, the PACs that funded his campaign, tell him to do. You know, so it's just a different PAC that was influencing the party here, and that's been a general problem in the history of the CPUSA, how influenced it was by Moscow, because it was, up until a certain point, the only successful working class dictatorship in the world. But it suffocated our ability to develop plentifully and to the potentialities that we had, and American Marxism adapt to our situation.
Yeah, the sources I'm seeing here say that Foster even rejected the secret speech in 56, but that could be wrong, so I'll look into it more after the stream maybe. I don't see the links that you sent, but Jimmy Shoot, thank you, Jimmy Shoot, with Arabic characters for the 20. Appreciate you, brother. That's huge. Thank you very much. We will be sure to use it wisely. Marxist book recommendations for geopolitics. You could read anything by Hudson. He's probably the best like Marxist economist doing geopolitical analysis and stuff today. You could read Parenti is great. I mean, it's outdated because it was in the 90s and early 2000s. But like, if you want to learn about like the war on Yugoslavia, Parenti's book is probably the best one out there for English speakers. If you want to understand imperialism in general, I would read his Against Empire or Dirty Truths. Any of these books are good. Actually, I'd probably go with Parenti is the one I've read who does the most like straight up geopolitical analysis in his books and explaining how imperialism works. You got to read Lenin's Imperialism too, obviously. But.
Yeah, it's important to understand that geopolitics has its foundations in geoeconomy. So it'd be good to not just look at geopolitics, but geopolitical economy. And I think the person working most explicitly with that framework today is both Hudson, but also Radhika Desai, who's done a lot of good work.
Yeah,
there.
true.
She's
great.
Yeah, and then a lot of what these geopolitics books are compilations of articles that quote unquote experts make on the basis of ongoing affairs and commentaries that are about what's happening in the world. So if you really want to study geopolitics, it's better to follow some of the more cutting edge places publishing commentaries on geopolitics than to grab the books. You grab the books for foundational theory, for history, for literature, for stuff that's so ongoing. It's better to just read the articles, to read the scholarly articles, and to get your information from that.
Absolutely. What was I gonna say? I had something else to say, but I can't remember. Oh, I was gonna bring up Nate's comment. He said he remembered hearing that, if this is true, it's crazy, that Khrushchev asked Foster on his deathbed, or came to see Foster on his deathbed, and Foster praised Mao, which would be insane because that was obviously Sino-Soviet split era. That would be wild if he did that. So we got to get to the bottom of this because
I don't know if the
Foster did that.
I don't know if the split was that intense at that time.
No, but the seeds of it were already there.
The seeds were.
Sure. They did not like Khrushchev ever.
But they have this period of like almost a decade where they're just like flirt fighting with each other. Khrushchev takes a few trips to China and they set up like debates to see if they can work things out, and they fail. And then they do the same thing some months after or a year after. And there was something inevitable, I think, in the split. It's very sad, and in hindsight we can look at it and be like, man, that was fucking stupid. It should have never happened. But if you look at the years going up to the real intense Sino-Soviet split, they were really trying to reconcile, and there couldn't be any reconciliation with a Khrushchev administration that the Maoists felt was a complete collapse into revisionism.
For sure. That Zhao Enlai quote is my favorite. When Khrushchev says the problem is I'm working class and you're not, and Zhao says we have another thing but we do have one thing in common. We're both traitors to our class. Do you guys like David Graeber's book? His book on debt is pretty solid. Yeah, I like that book a lot. There's parts where I feel like if he was following like a more strict Marxist method, it could have made the book even better. But it's his piece of history. I got it for my upcoming essay that's been upcoming for like 2 years now because I keep researching for it about the gold standard. But in the history of currency, which his book is kind of a must read at this point if you're going to do anything on that. So it's very good.
And Graeber was a popularizer of Hudson. That's how Hudson himself has spoken about Graeber. He has some ideas that I think are unique. His idea of baseline communism is pretty interesting. I think we talked about it last time we spoke together on stream, so I don't want to repeat myself. But yeah, he was an interesting person and someone worth reading, even if he's not a Marxist and has certain historical narratives that I don't think the Marxists would agree with. But we learn from everyone.
Have you heard of soy liberal Matt Dillahunty? Yes, I grew up in a evangelical Christian household. I've absolutely heard of Matt Dillahunty. He's smart. He had a debate with Jordan Peterson where he absolutely destroyed him. Like, he's a smart guy, but he has dedicated his life to arguing against religion and arguing for atheism. And with all the material evils in the world today, with imperialism and capitalism and mass poverty and mass starvation and an ongoing genocide funded with our tax dollars, it's like if you look at all that and you're like, you know what I can do with my intelligence and my intellect? Yell at religious people for believing in God and taking their kids to church on Sunday, or they teach them, like, instill moral values, like, of course, like I said, I grew up in the church. I have a million bajillion critiques of religion I could give you, but I would rather just, let people have their religious beliefs and share what I believe in terms of, the material world, what's actually going on in the world, and push for a more rational and sensible politics. And there's critiques of religion to be made. I critique it from time to time when it's relevant. But to just make your whole life, being like an edgy teenage atheist who calls every religious person a moron, is kind of silly. But Dillahunty is a smart person. Do you know him, Carlos?
No, I've never heard of him.
You should. ACP is pro-Christian fundamentalist. Definitely not. If you're a fundamentalist, you're probably not a communist.
No. We are a Muslim party. We're
Yes.
guided by Sharia law, and that's that.
Yes.
Bye, Gary Busey.
Communism is Sharia law.
Yeah, I've heard his name, and I looked him up now, and I can recognize the face. I don't know if I've seen him on Escuela de Cuadros before.
This Bolivar guy?
Yeah, Bolivar Echevarria. From what I'm looking at here, it looks interesting. He's at the UNAM, National Autonomous University of Mexico. I just published an article with their journal that's tied to CELAC, the Centro de Estudios Laborales, whatever the fuck. It's like a center for labor and communist and socialist studies that's very, very old. And that journal has some of the most prestigious people as editors. They had Enrique Dussel as an editor. I wonder if they had Echevarria as an editor, because it was all the leftists basically in UNAM. But I got to publish an article about what I think about the Trump administration. So you can check that out. It's called Revista Memoria. You look up Revista Memoria CELAC or Revista Memoria UNAM, you'll be able to find it.
Khrushchev F the USSR. He was the beginning of the downfall. Any opinions? Yeah, I agree with that. I think things were running pretty well under Stalin. That's one of the places where I disagree, or where I agree with like traditional Maoists. They basically think that things went awry under Khrushchev and that Stalin was doing well, and I agree with that. You heard of distributism? It's Catholic socialism. I haven't. Is it just distributing things more equally? It's interesting. I like Catholic social teaching. We both do. Atheism activists are libertarians or anarchists. Yeah, I think Dillahunty's like a libertarian, liberal type guy. But I have a great video pulled up, or that I want to pull up from the hands-off protests. These very, very rousing liberal protests where they're saying, hands off NATO. Don't you touch our precious NATO, Trump. NATO protects our democracy. And they're protesting for more money to be sent to Ukraine. Very important things. These guys are really challenging the establishment as usual. I don't know if there have been any socialist groups involved with these. Do you know, Carlos?
Not sure.
I'm not sure if like DSA or whatever is doing anything. It's probably too imperialist even for like them. But this is one of the videos that blew my mind when I saw it. I cannot believe this is real, truly. But this is from the hands-off protests.
Protests gone wrong.
Can you guys hear this? Can you guys hear the sound?
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay, I can't, but I'll just keep playing it. Wait, but if we pause here, let me go back a little bit for a second, just so we can look at the context. What's that we got over here? It says "Save Democracy," and it's a Ukraine flag shaped as a heart.
Yeah.
And then back here we have "Restore Foreign Aid." So these guys are basically just mad about all of the best things that Trump is doing. They're basically mad about the things that Trump has done to roll back U.S. imperialism, and they're protesting it. Gotta be, I mean, we've gotten some insane protest videos the past few years with everything going on, but that's got to be one of the craziest I ever seen. I was alone scrolling Instagram when I saw that, and I went, oh my God. This guy with a shirt that says, I am the weapon, goes up, strolls up there, straight up decks this lady in the face who's having a schizophrenic breakdown at the pro-NATO protest. Oh, hopefully that doesn't get us taken off YouTube.
Look, man, I don't endorse putting your hand on women, but that was objectively hilarious. This guy walks into the fucking camera view with a shirt that says "I am the weapon," and he shows us how he's the weapon. But here's the thing: if was the lady that was crashing out, was she protesting the liberal shit that the other people were protesting? Was she the based one politically, or where were they? Because it's such a clusterfuck of liberal politics here.
That's true. I watched that video many times, and I could not comprehend for the life of me what that lady was saying. But maybe she was just, screaming facts at him. Maybe
she could have been the
saying,
least based Putinist.
Right. Who knows? We'll never know. That lady sounded like she was gargling peanut butter. All right, I got another video here too. Video and just tweet from Pete Hegseth. What's he again? What's his actual role? The old Fox News host who has a Deus Volt tattoo.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I just referenced it in my article, but I can't remember.
Yeah, he's like the, involved with defense. He's got some super high up position where he's in charge of the military and defense. And Trump just promised a $1 trillion military budget. $1 trillion. They say he's rebuilding our military. The only part of America that didn't need to be rebuilt, the military, where we spend more than the next 7 countries combined. And these idiots, these morons who ran on an anti-war platform are out here bragging about $1 trillion military budget. Is that where Americans want their taxes to go? I can't imagine this is super popular. I mean, it's easy to get people riled up about the military. You pitch it as defense. Everybody wants strong defense, obviously. But I think a lot of people are aware that we have over 1,000 military, nearly 1,000 military bases around the world. And the next country, the second place country, is like China or Russia with 12. Right? We're the only country who's maintaining this massive empire, and it's extremely expensive. And I feel like Trump's ego, he just wanted to be the first one to hit $1 trillion. That was probably the only thing driving this, but it's wild.
It's disgusting. It's disgusting because, like you said, people elected this presidency because it posited itself as anti-war. It said it was going to be a common sense administration that was going to stop forever wars. It was going to drain the swamp and attack the deep state. And so far, we've seen none of that. We saw a half-assed tariff policy that was just put on pause. But even if it wasn't put on, it was put on pause with the exception of China, right? Like if putting tariffs on China could significantly do anything to the Chinese economy, which has even in the last 6 years continued to make itself more independent from America as a consumer base. So the tariff policy, as your recent video pointed out, is not conjoined with any of the other things that would make that form of protectionism capable of bringing back jobs, of lowering the cost of doing business, of guaranteeing the basic necessities for people so that you can lower the cost of doing business, and of cracking down on the financial parasitic elements that are the ones that raise the cost artificially of doing business. So it would have spiraled into a great failure because of how incomplete it was. So there's nothing that I think the Trump administration has done conclusively. There's been certain steps that have been positive, but he hasn't been able to complete in any arena something that would warrant him being able to keep his promise. And this goes contrary to something I wrote just 2 months ago for our journal and for a Cuban cultural magazine, where I said that the liberals were freaking out a month in because it seemed like Trump was going to fulfill his promise of ending the war in Ukraine, of dismantling the deep state. It was a time where he was moving towards completely destroying USAID. He had talked about destroying potentially the National Endowment for Democracy and other institutions, and cracking down on various other aspects of the wasteful imperialist bureaucracy. But none of that has really materialized into much. And I think what we're seeing is something that Brian Berletic mentioned in a video a couple weeks ago, where he said that, look, if you have a warlord that has a sword and he cuts the heads off the other warlords from other from other places, and then he gets their swords and he adds it to his sword, and you keep doing that, at some point you have this really scary looking sword with a bunch of mini swords going all over the place. But it's kind of like those beds of nails. When there's so many, you can lay on them and you're not going to get cut. Nothing's fundamentally going to happen. So then people see the warlord removing swords and they're like, oh my God, he's dismantling this oppressive regime. He's going to bring us peace and prosperity and whatever else. And then he's left with the initial sword, and then he sharpens it and he continues to accumulate skeletons. So perhaps that's what happened. What was cut were the fatty parts of the imperialist deep state institutions, so that the rest of it can function more efficiently. But it's just a clusterfuck of unfulfilled promises.
I see people pointing out that it'll be mostly profits for the military-industrial complex. It's crazy how much free money those bastards get. Raytheon and Boeing, and if you go to like LA, they have these massive plants for weapons manufacturing. The only thing we freaking manufacture in this country anymore, if we even do. I'm sure a lot of the parts and manufacturing is done outside the U.S. too, but it's like people talk about welfare queens. Who's a bigger welfare queen than these military contractors? All the millions or billions of dollars in weapons that they sell to Israel, that's ultimately coming from American taxpayers and the U.S. government. The money that they get from the war in Ukraine, $1 trillion that's going to be used to line their profits and the profits of their shareholders now.
And a significant chunk of
ridiculous.
the stuff that's manufactured here for the military-industrial complex is done by prison labor. And
Right.
Remember that the vast majority of the people in prison are there for nonviolent offenses, for smoking the same sort of dope that the kids of the elite and corrupt politicians that govern us smoke.
You telling me Hunter Biden's guilty? He got pardoned, though, by his dad. Well, I'll get to the super chats after we watch Trump announce this. He also said something funny here to Netanyahu. He kind of talked down to him, which I'm sure he just knows a lot of his base are like JQers now and anti-Israel. So he's trying to still seem like a tough guy while doing everything that the neocons and military-industrial complex wants him to do in Zionist lobby.
The sound's not coming through.
Oh, one sec. I could probably fix that. We reshare. How about now?
Built the military during my first term, and we have great things happening with our military. We also essentially approved a budget, which is in the facility. You'll like to hear this, of $1 trillion, $1 trillion, and nobody's seen anything like it. We have to build our military, and
nobody's seen anything like it. It's amazing. It's beautiful bases all over Iraq. We're taking the oil. When Obama was president, he waged stupid wars. My wars are going to be bigger, better. We're going to win all the wars.
We're very cost conscious, but the military is something that we have to build, and we have to be strong because you got a lot of bad forces out there now. So we're going to be approving a budget. And I'm proud to say, actually, the biggest.
Which bad forces do we have besides the guy sitting next to you, Trump, that could potentially invade the U.S.? What bad forces are these that are considering launching an offensive attack on the U.S.? They don't exist. All these bad forces around the world, the Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah, even Russia, they're literally just defending themselves from U.S. NATO aggression. They're defending themselves from the guy sitting to your left right there, Bibi Netanyahu, who's a modern-day Hitler. And I don't say that lightly. I know everybody, throws around that word. No, these are the new Nazis, the Israelis, and he's the leader of them. He's their Hitler. Those are the bad forces around the world, and they're all backed by us. And we're more likely to get nuked by Israel than we are by any other country because of their Samson option, I believe it's called, where it says if there's an existential threat to the state of Israel, they'll use nukes. Where do you think they got those nukes? From the tech and information and money given to them by the United States. So it's just so nonsensical. This is a huge Trump L. It's been just a roller coaster of, W's and L's since he got in office. And this is a huge L that kind of makes it look like, all the W's were just fake. And he's just
and this is why they have to bombard you with Marvel movies and other fucking nonsense and bullshit, because you've been used to your whole life of seeing this script. There's bad guys, there's good guys. We got to go get the bad guys. To get the bad guys, we got to do it by any means necessary. We got to build up the military, do all this other stuff. And then you see it on your television set on a current event, and you're like, the reference point is the shit you've seen over and over and over in these billion-dollar funded military-industrial complex hands involved movies. So this is it. This is the typical Marvel script. We need to give more money to the military so that we can fight the bad guys. And the world is divided between good and bad guys, and we're the good guys.
Yep.
It's one we've ever done for the military. We're cutting other things that were under Doge, but under a lot of other. When you look at a woman getting $2 billion for environmental, and it had nothing to do with environmental, and they had $100 in the bank, and they give her $2 billion. Many of those cases, all that stuff is.
I've noticed when he's doing something that he knows is going to be controversial with his base, he turns to these just plaid. It's like the Democrats' version of talking about freedom and democracy, where he's like, well, we cut something that was going to this one lady who was an environmentalist. She was a tree hugger getting government money. So, if you think about it, spending $1 trillion to bomb Yemeni children isn't that bad. Right? Because, we got rid of money that was going to a leftist activist in Iowa City who was transgender. We got rid of that. So come on, give us your money. Give us your children. We're sending them to Iraq now. You're muted, Carlos.
And it's purely performative, as you're hinting at. And some of the more consistent people in the sphere of MAGA commentary and analysis have pointed to this. People like Colonel Douglas McGregor and Tucker Carlson have talked about the different ways in which some of the central moves that Trump has made, which have been somewhat positive, have been pretty performative in character. And look, this is stuff that we've been predicting for a very, very long time, because there's fucking idiots out there that think that we just, give a blind check of support to Trump or whatever the fuck. That's not the case. We're not surprised by this phenomenon that some people in MAGA spaces are calling the Trump's betrayal of MAGA. It doesn't surprise us. We've been writing articles and speaking about how this is what is going to happen. He's going to pretend to be one thing. We hope that would be what he would be, but as people who have a pessimism of the mind, as Gramsci would say, we understand that that's not what's going to happen, because we understand, as Marx says, that the president is just a puppet that's up there to serve the interests of the empire. They could have put a monkey in a suit and it would have been the same fucking thing, irrespective of who would have won, Kamala or Trump. It's about the underlying foundational, unchanging policy of the imperialist deep state, and that is tending towards the same place that it's always been tending. We have to listen to the guy that owns BlackRock. I'm forgetting his name, but during the campaign period, he said something along the lines of, "I'm sick and tired of hearing this is the most important election of our era of our time, because the truth is nothing's fundamentally going to change. Just like every time you tell me it's the most important election of our time." When people like the CEO of BlackRock tell us that, I think we should listen more carefully, because that's fundamentally the truth.
It's Larry Fink.
Larry Fink, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and much of the MAGA base, I mean, I've talked to MAGA people recently who say, I don't even like Trump, but look at what the Democrats are. And it's the substance that he offers or promises and doesn't follow through on that a lot of people are into. They're promising to bring back manufacturing and industry, improve the American economy, stop doing this free market neoliberalism, complete neoliberalism, do more of like implement some of these social democratic policies, talk about ending the war in Ukraine. Like, a lot of people got on board with these, and that's why, we don't you talk about MAGA as a basket of deplorables. In a lot of ways, it is objectively the most revolutionary anti-establishment political movement in the country that actually has the power to change anything right now. That's objectively true, and in many ways it's the most progressive movement in the country. But you have to look at MAGA as beyond Trump. You have to look at it as a totality. You have to look at the people who make up MAGA, the working class people who make it up, even small business owners and stuff. And there are different elements within MAGA, some of them reactionary and some of them, quite progressive. But got some super chats here. Thank you, Battle Cossack. Another one. The Hour of the Furnaces. Yeah, you've been recommending this one to me forever. I haven't got a chance to check it out. I rarely get a chance to watch movies. Right now, I'm just so busy. But I will check it out at some point, I promise. Thoughts on Dean Withers, I think is his last name, the soy TikTok liberal? Yeah, I don't know. Those guys will not debate me. They will not. They will not interact with me, other than one. There's one of those. Those were the guys who invented the straight white dudes for Kamala meme. Like 4 white liberal TikTokers who get paid by Democratic Party connected NGOs to make the TikToks that they do. Only one of them will talk to me. His name's Chris. He's pretty cool as far as those guys go. I feel like he's just like a follower, kind of. He's like just kind of doing it for fun, and he's friends with Harry, and he's making money, so he's like, whatever, I'll keep doing this. I debated him once. I didn't get a recording of it because it was on his TikTok stream, but he actually let me come up. Harry never lets me come up. And I request often. And Dean doesn't either. I don't know. I haven't challenged him as much, but yeah, I dismantled the guy's arguments. Obviously, he's like a 19-year-old neolib. But I didn't get a recording of it. Hopefully I got him thinking a little bit, though. Hopefully he'll leave that path one day. It's really shameful to take Buddy to push that kind of ideology. Dylan, thank you for the $10 super chat. Appreciate you, brother. Do you think war with Iran is inevitable, or is it another nothing burger? I don't think it's inevitable. I mean, that would be, I don't know if we'll see that under the Trump administration. That would be such a massive betrayal of everything that he's run on a level that I don't think he would want to risk. There are high profile people now in the Republican Party, like, Tucker Carlson or even Douglas McGregor, who are actively speaking out against war with Iran and getting, hundreds of thousands of impressions, people who are, agreeing with them, calling out Trump, saying, you promised to end the wars. How could you do this? The opposite of what we need is more hostility with Iran. So I doubt it, but, one day maybe. But I think a regional war is more likely than a U.S. war with Iran.
But you have this interesting predicament where the U.S. has objective interests around the region, which would be affected if it carries war against Iran in the ways in which Trump is speaking about it, which is effectively like bombing nuclear facilities. That would be catastrophic. I recommend people watch the interview that Tucker Carlson did with the Prime Minister of Qatar, where he explains in detail the sort of effects that we would see if such a policy was undertaken. Hundreds of thousands of human beings would lose their lives. Within 2-3 days, regions with millions of people would just not have any water to do anything with. So this situation, I mean, if it happens, what do you think those countries are going to do? They're going to, of course, develop very quickly the nuclear weapons that they're very close to developing and have decided not to. But of course, you have the Iran nuclear deal. But if there's something that history has shown us is that, fortunately, the reality is that it's only when you get the nuke that you're able to have any power and any ability to ward off the attacks from imperialism, because they understand what the consequences are. So if an attack like that happened, I think that it's not impossible to see Iran speeding up the process of getting the bomb and doing what it's going to do to its hostile forces in the region. But then at the same time, Judge Napolitano or Neapolitano, I forget what the last name is, he was just on George Galloway today, and he was talking about how Bibi Netanyahu really wants Trump to wage a war against Iran because Israel is a fractured society. There's many different factions that, for some reason or another, dislike the Netanyahu government. And the way that a government that is delegitimized by the population is able to obtain legitimacy historically has been through war. War is one of the great means through which unpopular presidents or prime ministers become more popular. We have the case, of course, of Bush Jr. in the U.S. So I think it's not impossible. It's not off the table to have a war with Iran, but there's other material incentives for why this shouldn't. For the U.S., even thinking as an imperialist power, shouldn't wage war against Iran, especially those Gulf states who will be terribly affected because they have Iran as a neighbor. I think you're muted, Eddie.
I don't think Iran right now is moving towards nuclearization. Unfortunately, it seems like the reformists rather than the revolutionaries are gaining steam in Iran. And the U.S. has a lot of their money tied up with sanctions and stuff that is leading to a lot of opportunism in Iran. A lot of people who want to get their money back, so they're trying to appease the U.S. rather than taking a principled anti-imperialist stance. So for the U.S. to, launch an attack against them and push them in the direction of creating nuclear weapons, like what Carlos said, it would be really, really ill-conceived. It would truly, if they did that, it would truly be an example of Israel actually convincing the U.S. to do something like the JQers believe is what happened with Iraq, as if the oil companies and stuff didn't have anything to do with that. As always, the Zionists are just a part of the entire puzzle, pushing for their own interests. But if they were to attack Iran, that would be, I don't see anyone who benefits from that besides Netanyahu, and not even, Israeli society, like you said, but just Netanyahu and his far-right coalition. And I don't know if Trump really gives a shit about Netanyahu, to be honest. He loves Israel, but I don't know if he cares about him as a person. Thank you, Michelle, for giving 5 subs. Appreciate you, brother.
Thank you, Comrade Corvus.
Congrats to whoever gets those.
The thing about Netanyahu is that, and I just heard Max Blumenthal speak about this, within the right wing of Israel, he's a moderate. So he's not even part of the most extreme part of since he has to answer to the U.S., he's had to tone down a lot of positions. So
he is, but he's also, in order to, when he took power, it was through a far-right coalition. So he's got these people like Itamar Ben-Gvir in his coalition. And in a lot of ways, they're the ones running the show, running the IDF. And these are insane people who will pee on dead bodies if they're, Arab. like insane people who are openly Jewish supremacists. Those are the people who guide a lot of the policy right now, who make up Netanyahu's coalition that got him in power within, Israeli politics. And then he kind of puts the smiling face on it, the more toned down face, which is crazy because the guy's a genocidal Nazi lunatic. But, in order to appease the U.S. and speak to the public, he gives the appearance of being a little more sane. But his roots are, the roots of the Israeli government are in the extreme right of Zionist society, which is like right layered on top of right, like just
The
pure
extreme
nonsense.
right in a society where 99% of the people are in favor of the genocide or of intensifying the pace of the genocide. It's really sickening. It's a society that has completely drank the supremacist and genocidal Kool-Aid. And I brought that Netanyahu thing up just because I've seen something with Bernie and the discourse of these other the social democrats, democratic socialists, which is that instead of speaking about Israel or Zionism, they speak about the Netanyahu regime. And they try to pin the actions that we've seen over the last X amount of years to just the Netanyahu administration and to the so-called Israeli far right. But these are just the purest forms of the expressions of Zionism as a colonial project. So this, always be wary of these attempts to overemphasize like the far right character or the Netanyahu administration when discussing what's going on in the region, because that's a way to whitewash the Zionist project and ignore the many ways in which those actions of those far right, so-called far right people in Israel are the ones that are the most consistent with Zionist ideology.
Yeah, it just rips the mask off is all. This far right coalition is just the inevitable conclusion. They just tell the truth about Israel instead of pretending they're socialists or liberals. What are your thoughts on Due Dissidents and Jimmy Dore? Thanks for all you do. Thank you. I like Due Dissidents. Jimmy Dore's hit or miss, but he's good most of the time. Probably agree with 90% of what he says. He's off base anytime he talks about communism or Marxism, and he starts to sound like a boomer. And I also think Jimmy's brain kind of got not broken, but when he got vaccine injured, he became completely obsessed with COVID and Fauci. And if you listen to him talk now, pretty much every point he makes goes back to COVID or is a joke about COVID. And it just gets old, and he's funny, he's a comedian, he's on the right side of most of the issues. It's cool. I don't think he's a extremely intelligent person who's reading and learning new stuff all the time. I think he kind of just finds news stories and, gives his bent on it. But he was more principled than a lot of the alt media during COVID. He gets a lot of issues right. He's overall a force for good, for sure.
Yeah, I think
Dissidents guys, I think, are a little smarter. I like them a lot.
Yeah, I would say a lot.
A lot smarter, yes.
They're cool guys. I've had the chance to speak with, I don't know which one of them, but I've spoken to one of them at least through Twitter a few times. They're dope. They're dope. Well, we hope that we can build more bridges of communication with them. And I think they did a reaction video to work that ACP did a while back. They covered it very favorably. So, if anyone's listening or if anyone can share this with them, we'd be more than happy to go on their program and talk about what, we're doing. Because if you're going to talk about the left wing in the U.S. and the class struggle and the struggle for workers' rights and against war, I think our party is playing a very important role in that fight. So we'd love to, share what it is that we're doing, what got us going, and why we think that the ACP is the party where, the people that have faith in the working class and that stand against war and for the basic social and economic rights that we should have had a long time ago, and that stand for working class power should be in the ACP or supporting it in some form or another.
Yeah, I should reach out to them because I think they would be willing to talk on the show. Happy birthday, Eddie. Salute from Florida ACP. Thank you, Harold. Appreciate you, brother. Keep up the great work. Keep organizing there in Florida. A lot of potential in Florida. Keep getting after it. have you ever considered Do Dissidents? They worked with RBN and Jimmy Dore a couple times. They're trying to make an art scene separate from shit lives. Nice. Thank you, SB. Appreciate that, brother. Yeah, we just answered that question, but thank you so much for the super chat. We'll definitely try to get on Do Dissidents sometimes. Looks like a lot of people out there see the problems with capitalism and imperialism, but have no solutions or just unrealistic solutions to deal with it. I mean, yeah, that's the importance of theory, right? Like, people try to downplay the importance of a theoretical understanding, but it truly is so important. Otherwise, you just end up being an anarchist. I was thinking about anarchism today. It's like, it's like the silliest, most immature, individualistic ideology. Like, their hearts are in the right place. But it's like when you're a college student and you're like, I'm going to change the world and I could change the world. And here's exactly how I want the world to change. I've been taught that socialism and Marxism are evil. So we need to do something different. And I'm going to construct this new world, this new utopia that I invented in my head. And it's like most of them grow out of that after college. But it's like if you hang on to that after college, it's kind of embarrassing that there are like adult anarchists. And it's so individualistic, it's so naive, it's so utopian. It's just like wanting to change the world and then letting emotion and your own feelings lead you, right, forever, and you never undo that. Communism, dialectical materialism, Marxism, Leninism is you want to change the world, and through study and hard work, you find the best way to do that. You find the best possible way to do that based on the information that humanity has collected over the years. You understand that a new system needs to be built from our current system. You understand that there's a contradiction inherent in our society, which is what leads people to want to change the system and want to overthrow it. And it's that same contradiction between classes in our society that drives anarchists to do what they do, right? But they fight that contradiction with their emotions and with their own individualistic feelings and morals. Whereas a communist is able to put those aside and study what's worked in the past and what hasn't, and take what works and understand based upon that contradiction that exists within society, that the only way you can truly change that and create lasting change is through advancing the struggle of the workers, who make up one pole of that contradiction, the larger pole that contains more people. So it's understanding society as it currently exists and how we can how we can actually change that society, how we can actually transform it. Whereas anarchists are just like, nope, I'm gonna create some utopian system in my head that's never ever worked or been enacted historically, and that's what we'll do, and it'll be perfect and the greatest. It's quite silly.
If I can take a stab at this one, and perhaps get just a little bit into philosophy weeds. After all, there's some substance behind the monkey in the suit that you see on your screen. The traditional, I think this gets at a question of, if people know, why isn't more activity seen, or at least productive activity? This gets at the question of ideology, I think. And the traditional Marxist, orthodox Marxist approach gets captured very neatly by a phrase that Marx uses at the beginning of Capital, in the section on the commodity fetish, where he says, they know not what they do, but they do it anyways. So it's a matter of, in essence, of not knowing, but still participating in a specific process. Therefore, ideology is then understood from the standpoint of false consciousness, of a sort of inverted way of thinking about the state of affairs, of not understanding things correctly. I think that we are and have been for a while in a horizon where ideology doesn't just take that form. That's a form that it takes for a lot of people. I'm not as extreme as some of the other people who theorize about ideology that say, no, this is just the only form now, and they point to something else. I think there's multiple forms. That's still one of them. But there's this other one that's very interesting, and that I think captures part of the spirit of what you're trying to get at, James, which is that today we can reformulate it following Peter Sloterdijk, a German, I believe he's German, conservative philosopher, by saying that they know what they do very well, but they do it anyways, right? And here is, in part, a component of Zizek's understanding and critique of ideology, which is that it's not just a matter of belief, but it's a matter of the practice and habits and institutions that we're a part of that shape those habits. And Zizek brings up a very interesting example with Niels Bohr, a quantum physicist, who has a friend over, and they're going to walk into his barn, and he has a horseshoe on the front of the door. And the friend asks, "Why do you have that? That horseshoe? Don't you know that that's a sort of primitive, superstitious symbol?" And he's like, but here's the thing: it works even if you don't believe in it. So we have this unique situation where there's a whole lot of people who don't buy the sauce anymore, who understand we don't really live in a democracy, who understand that we don't do things in other countries because we're spreading democracy or spreading freedom or fighting for human rights or none of this shit, who are literally, conscious and understand that what the problems are. So it's not a question of they know not what they do. Yes, they know what they do, but yet they're doing it anyways because they're forced to participate in these institutions in order to survive. And here I think that at the level of like working class resistance, the work of someone who we just published in Red America, which, by the way, subscribe to Red America if you haven't already. It's the most cutting edge journal on Marxist theory. You can do so at redamerica.acp.us. Vivek Shibber, we just had him in Red America, and he makes it clear that this conception that it's just about having the wrong ideas and being fooled into accepting contrary ideas, in most cases, is not what's going on. People understand what's going on, but if they act on it, they lose their job, they lose their ability to participate in the institutions that allow them to reproduce their life and to survive. Look at what's happening. I know it's not the best example, but in some of the Starbucks unionizing efforts, I know how we feel about Starbucks unionizing, but in some of them, it was the case that when in a specific location they wanted to unionize, they would just close down the whole store and that's it, pack up, and they're going to do it in another place with new employees. What does that mean? That means that even the slightest bit of resistance gets you sacked and gets you completely alienated from the means of acquiring a means of subsistence, which means that central to people continuing to participate in this, even though they know the truth, is resignation. They resign themselves to continue doing it simply because, if you don't, you get screwed and you can't survive. And that's the element of mute compulsion that capitalism provides. You don't see it. No one's there with a gun telling you have to go to the market and sell your labor power. But what happens if you don't sell that labor power and you have nothing else to sell? You die. You can't afford your house. You can't afford food. You can't afford the basic necessities to survive. And that's a form of compulsion. That's a form of coercion that is basic to the capitalist system and that goes unseen, has necessarily a component of hiddenness to it.
I was reading about that today. The component of hiddenness and how everything disguises itself under capitalism and confuses the categories of economics even, and makes the means of production appear as capital rather than what they are, but in their capitalist form, which is actually a product of their social relations. Same with labor, same with ground rent. These things are all portrayed as being universal and always existing historically, and when in reality they're specific social, or they correspond to specific social relations. The means of production they don't have to be capital. They take that form in a capitalist society. Labor in every form of society isn't wage labor. It's that under capitalism. And the capitalist economists say, no, capitalism is universal and it's the final, end destination of all human societies. And to be frank, nothing could be more retarded. That whole field needs to be thrown in the trash and shit on. Feliz cumpleaños, Eddie. Hope you're having a good one with your loved ones. Thank you, Bear. Gracias, Oso. Appreciate you. Thank you very much. Keep up the great work. Steve Bertram. I was an anarchist for years. It was a result of my being convinced that centralized power structures are inevitably corrupted. No utopian vision. Happy birthday. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's that too. You could just point at every single state and say all of these states made mistakes, so I'm going to condemn them all. Even though China's state has lifted 800 million people out of poverty and the American state has pushed millions of people into poverty and starvation. You know, you could say these are the same, and I condemn them both because they're both equally bad, rather than weighing the totality of their actions. That's the other anarchist thing, which is just a cop-out from taking a position that could get you in trouble with the establishment. But thank you so much, Steve. Appreciate you. Happy birthday, Eddie. We'll be forever grateful for your videos reading Marx and Lenin to start me on the road to communism. Cheers. Badass. Thank you, Molly. I didn't even know that. Molly's a longtime viewer, so really appreciate that. Charles Gauthier, birthday. Let's go. Thank you, comrade. Appreciate you. Selly. Let Selly shoot some confetti in the air. Let's go. 800 million. Can't even imagine. It's a crazy number. It is a crazy number. Communalism and not communism. You're right. You know what we need is we need like little like meeting places, right, where the workers can meet communally and make decisions. And then those meeting places will relay information from the workers to the centralized state apparatus so that it can serve the interests of the workers. What should we call them, though? I don't know. Maybe we should call them Soviet